Hello, everyone. I am here with TJ Woodward for the Worldhappiness Fest. It is quite an honor to be with you today, TJ. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mackenzie. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So TJ is a revolutionary recovery expert, best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and treatment specialist. But I always love to hear it from the actual person, TJ. Can you kind of walk us through your career and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I'm going to give a condensed version, but how I got here today, honestly, is I remember coming into this world as a very, very happy and joy-filled child. And through a series of events, had an experience of closing my heart. And the solution to that was addiction, was substance use. So basically, the reason I'm starting with that is my early life was filled with all kinds of pain and suffering, which I know is relevant to this topic. I got sober early in life, 20 years old. I also discovered New Thought and New Thought communities when I was in my early 20s, and the trajectory of my life changed dramatically. And Conscious Recovery was born out of my desire to help people end their suffering in a new and different way than what I see a lot of people doing when they work with addiction and recovery.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great background. Thank you for sharing that with us. Can you talk a little bit about why you believe people do suffer and why you believe people become addicted to a plethora of different things? I know that your methodology and the way that you think about this is quite different from other treatment ideology.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think fundamentally the reason we suffer is we separate from the truth of who and what we are. You know, we come into this world as whole and perfect spiritual beings, open, present, joy-filled, happy. I believe, and my experience has shown me that that's our natural state. And then we come into a world that teaches us about good, bad, right, wrong, competition. We have various different traumatic experiences, whether they're subtle and sometimes not so subtle. And what I have seen happen is we separate from that true nature, from our essential beingness. And when we do that, we begin to suffer because we start believing we're broken, the world is broken in some way, and then we usually set on a course, or we put ourselves on a course to try to find happiness from the outside in, and that is suffering when we're looking to the world to bring us happiness. So bottom line, we separate from our true nature, and that is what creates suffering.
And then you also look at addiction as actually, you call it the brilliant strategy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So when we separate from our true nature, we develop beliefs about ourselves, and it's much deeper than a thought, right? Usually, but just about 100% of the time, when I work with clients, they're carrying around core false beliefs. I am broken. I am damaged. There's something wrong with me. Most of the time, or quite often, that's actually trapped in the unconscious. And so when we have this core frequency or core vibration of brokenness, we continue to experience that pain and suffering in the world, and addiction comes in and brings relief from that. So I call it a brilliant strategy because in the beginning, for many of us, it was quite brilliant and it actually brought relief. Some could even say happiness, although we know it's a very short shelf life of happiness, or a very short experience of happiness. But when we reframe it as a brilliant strategy rather than the problem, we can start to dialogue with it and work with it in a fundamentally different way.
Wonderful. And I would love to have the audience learn about your new movement called Unharmable.
Yeah, so Unharmable launched about a year or so ago, along with my colleague Jeremy Miller. And we were really contemplating what the core of all of my teaching is, through my books, through my workshops, through conscious recovery, through my treatment modality. And we really looked at what the commonality is. And the commonality was profoundly simple for us. And that is the knowing that underneath all of our behavior, there is an essential self that's whole and perfect. So many of us, let's say we go to therapy and we start working on our past and we heal our past. When we believe there's something fundamentally broken about us, it makes it really challenging to start to heal that. when we recognize that underneath all of that, there's this essential self that's unharmed and unharmable, to me, it's a total game changer. You know, in our culture now, we talk a lot about life hack or mind shift or mindset shift. And all of that is important and limited because it's usually only working with the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than trying to reframe our stories, rewrite our narrative, which of course is popular these days and useful, we're taking it a little bit deeper and saying until we really get down and look what's buried in the unconscious, we're not going to be able to heal. And when we know there's this place that's unharmable, healing becomes really, really different.
I see. And so if this unharmable movement, you know, has the greatest impact that you would see in the world, what do you see the changes would happen if unharmable was the greatest success?
What we really hope to bring to the world with the unharmable movement is this recognition and sharing this message. A friend of mine is writing a book, What If You're Not As Effed Up As You Think You Are, right? And I love that because what she's saying something similar, and that is, what if there's this place of wholeness within us? And as each of us rediscover that truth about ourselves, we share this message with each other. What would happen to the world or for the world or in the world if more and more of us not only got in touch with that place that's unharmable, but shared it with 5 friends and 5 friends and 5 friends? Because in my experience, it's not really a belief, as I said, but it's actually a deep knowing. And as we share this message, I see people have their eyes light up, and sometimes there's a lot of emotion because maybe they've been believing they're broken for so long. And when we come in and say, what if there's a place within you that's unharmable? So the greatest hope for this is that it spread around the world, and that it spreads around the world and it becomes a different message than what a lot of what we're seeing with the divisiveness, the us and them, the finger pointing, the blame, the cancel culture. In addition to all of that happening, which is the human ego, we want to come in with a different message.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would imagine that if people felt that they were unharmable, then they would stop harming others. They would stop harming the planet. They would start harming animals. Like, it just completely, you know, spreads all over everything that exists within the world. So I completely agree with you. That famous saying of hurt people. And so you're really getting to that root. I would love also for people to hear one of my favorite stories that you tell, or you know, ideas that you have talked about before, is the movie projector and how people are projecting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and it's really fundamental to what we're talking about, because the truth is we're projecting everything that we're experiencing in the world from our own lens or our own projector. And so many of us believe that the world needs to change in order for us to be happy. We're talking about, yes, it's a mindset shift, but it's much deeper. It's a deeper knowing that, oh my gosh, because of my core ideas, my core frequency, my core vibration, I see that everywhere in the world. And so that works both ways, right? If I believe that I'm unharmable, if I believe that I'm a whole and perfect person, I will see that in the other people in my life. I will see that in the situations in the world. When I believe I'm broken or damaged, I see that in the world. And so what we're inviting people to do is flip. We can use the movie metaphor again, flip the script here, and you know, shift from wanting the world to change in order for us to be happy, and ask the question, what if I could discover the inner happiness into the internal suffering, and then recognize that then we project that out into the world. And as you said, that's the paradigm shift, right? Because that's when it becomes a ripple effect of love. It can be a ripple effect of fear. We've been through that this last year. We are ready now, more and more of us, to say, okay, in the midst of anything happening in the world, I'm going to project love. I'm going to project peace, and I'm going to project happiness. And I think life is an experiment. So let's see what happens. Let's do these internal shifts and changes and watch what happens in what we call reality.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up this past year. Can you talk a little bit more about that, like what we've been through as, you know, a global civilization and humanity, and what you think the opportunities are there.
Yeah, and thank you for saying opportunities, right? Because if it's true that we're projecting our own reality onto the world, and we look at what happened in this last year with COVID, with what's emerging around race and all the different divisiveness around politics in our country and in our world, we get to decide what we call it. And I want to be clear about something. What I'm not saying, because I do hear some spiritual teachers almost say, let's pretend that that's not happening, right? Let's only go to love and light. What I'm saying and what we're saying is, in the midst of that, when we call it horrible, we will see more horrible. And so I love that you asked the question, what's the opportunity? And I recognize that the opportunity for me personally, and in so many people I know, is let's bring the shadow up for healing. Right. And so when I did my deep work, which of course is an ongoing process, it was important for me, at least in part of that journey, to look at what I've buried in my unconscious, what was beneath the surface, what was in what we call the shadow, because it was running the show. Now, if we look at that collectively, you know, with racism, for example, that has been in so many ways buried in the unconscious. Obviously not every way, but I think what happened this past year, is it emerged because so many of us were slowing down and really asking ourselves what's important here. And I see it as, of course, it's painful for people to experience what they've experienced. And I want to also say that what's happening is an opportunity for healing. And each of us needs to move what's in the unconscious into conscious, so that we can start to heal our unconscious beliefs and biases and actually create a world that works for all.
What would you suggest for people watching to start that, start making the subconscious conscious, and really owning that unharmable mindset?
So I think there are a couple of things. One, super practical, spending time in the silence. There is no greater tool than slowing down, spending time in meditation, having a dedicated mindfulness practice. First and foremost, I want to say that. Then the second part of it is question everything. You know, we live in a highly opinionated culture, and I notice in my own development, I would see something posted and I would notice that I had a reaction, and then I would react out of fear or anger. My colleague, Dr. Gabor Mate, says trauma is not a memory, it's a reaction. So 3 steps: awareness, awareness, and awareness. To be aware of that reactive impulse and to be present with it, and then start to question my point of view. Where did I decide this? What am I making this mean? What else is possible here? So it really is twofold. One, dedicated time, really spending dedicated time creating and cultivating a relationship with the essential self, and then questioning every point of view and every perspective I have, and start to look at how we can gently dismantle all the beliefs or the ideas that we have been putting on top of our essential self. We start to believe in the lie. We start to believe that the lie is reality and reality is the lie, and the truth is much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then my last questions are surrounded around happiness, because it's the World Happiness Fest this week. So I would love to hear your ideas around what happiness is it a choice, and also what makes you happy?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially in our current culture, and I'll just say especially in America, because that's my experience, I think we think of happiness sometimes as like happy all the time, this elation that's always feeling really great. You know, we look at especially what we see online, it's like crush it, dominate, choose your own happiness. There's almost this forcefulness around it. And I think it is important to start with the definition of happiness for me. It really isn't about always being happy, or feeling what we might call positive emotions. It's a deep state of contentment, a deep state of being comfortable in my own skin, real deep acceptance of all parts of myself, and integration. Ultimately, though, true happiness, as we've already said, is knowing that place that's unharmable and living from that place, clearing the lens of the projector and recognizing that every moment is a choice. So let's talk about choice really quickly. I think it's really easy to say happiness is a choice, so everyone just choose it. And then people are like, well, I'm not experiencing happiness, so I must be wrong, I must be broken, I must be doing something wrong. And then it becomes more and more true. It's not always a conscious choice. It's quite often the unconscious choosing. So as we bring those old beliefs and ideas up to the surface, we can begin to recognize that we fundamentally do have a choice. I don't have a choice necessarily in what's happening in the world, but I do have a choice in how I'm perceiving it. And I do have a choice of which place within me I'm going to come from. Am I going to be coming from my woundology, as my friend Temple Hayes says, or am I going to be coming from my essential self? And that is fundamental. So what makes me happy is that knowing, that understanding that I do create my own reality and that I do have a choice moment to moment of how I be in the world. And I know that's not grammatically correct, but who I be is so much more important than what I do.
I love that. And that is such a powerful statement to end on. TJ, thank you so much. You've been a good personal friend and mentor of mine. It was a pleasure to interview you. And thank you for being part of the World Happiness Fest this year.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Such an honor. And thank you for all the amazing work you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
I live in the city of Pune. What I love about Pune is that it's a city that has heart, it's got music and theater and everything, and it makes it a very wholesome and complete city.
Rotterdam is the second city of the Netherlands. It's all about buildings and building.
Las Vegas is actually an extraordinary place to live. What most people don't appreciate is that behind those images, there is a very compassionate heart.
Sacramento is the capital of California. They have really promoting artists right now, and so a lot of new murals are going up, which is really making the energy of the city a lot more dynamic.
About 40% of the population of Pune city lives in slums. The second thing I would say is the issue of education, making education even better than what it is today. The challenges of any big growing city is what Pune is also facing.
We have a very poor educational outcome in terms of students graduating.
Literacy levels that are very high in some areas, very low in others. So ensuring that our education system is reaching everyone.
25% of children grow up in poverty in Rotterdam. In my opinion, that's a huge amount.
So Las Vegas has its dark side, as any city does, and among those areas is our children. So 1 out of 10 of our teenagers attempt suicide.
Well, I think one of the top issues is homelessness in the city. The poor, poverty, is an issue that exists in a major city like Dallas.
Homelessness and poverty, and I know that's true for so many cities, but poverty is huge. 1 in 4 or 5 children are hungry and in poverty, living in poverty, and it's just not acceptable.
Inequality is growing in Australia. That is an issue. Environmental issues are big ones as well.
In Australia, every 5 days a woman is killed, generally by their partner. And interestingly, every day 6 people kill themselves, 5 of them are men.
Everything the world needs is there. You have the technology, you've got the people, you've got the money, you have volunteers, you have everything, and yet the world is not working. And I think the missing piece, the missing glue is compassion.
You can draw a line from Sandy Hook to Columbine to a number of different mass shootings here in America. And you can also ask the question, why? And the answer seems to be low emotional intelligence. And so compassion is really the curriculum for increasing emotional intelligence.
If humanity wants to save the world, I think the only path to reach that is the path of compassion. I'm so convinced about that.
We live in a time right now that's not very kind, but I think there's a lot of kind people out there, and we need to support and celebrate goodness and kindness. So we're just kind of changing the focus.
But it has to come from here, it has to come from you. It's personal responsibility, and you will feel uncomfortable, but that's okay. That is really okay. Feel uncomfortable.
I mean, really, I guess really what I want to say is the reason that we're compassionate is because our own healing is contingent on what we offer to other people.
And so what I think we need to develop is a transformation of a mindset from self-centeredness to one of other-centeredness, and begin to see others as I see myself.
It creates a ripple effect. You start with yourselves, your city, you advance to your state, your country, and before you know it, you've touched someone around the world.
I think it's imperative that we all join this movement and learn from each other and support each other and work towards a more wholesome world.